I'm really pleased that you have joined us this afternoon and look forward to a really good discussion. Please note we are recording this webinar, just to let you know. So if you don't know the British Chambers of Commerce, we are a network of 53 accredited chambers of commerce across the length and breadth of the United Kingdom, and 75 British chambers and associations across the world. So our roots are local, but our reach is global. And through the pandemic, we've been supporting our members through some really big challenges. But just before the pandemic, I remember going around the country and talking to business leaders right across the United Kingdom and asking them what was top of mind for business. This was February 2020, if you can remember such a time. And other than skills, which is always a key issue, the big thing that everyone wanted to talk about was the climate challenge and the road to net zero. And we had big plans for all the things we were going to do, and then a pandemic hit. But I'm delighted that this year we've been able to get back to this really important topic and launch our Climate Challenge campaign, working right across the international network of chambers of commerce to do more work in this area. And as part of that, we've partnered with O2 to deliver a Climate Challenge hub, which has lots of, Net Zero hub, which has lots of really brilliant resources for businesses to take a look at. Now, we know that this net zero means lots to some people, and other people don't really know what it means at all. So that's what today is all about, is finding out more about it and finding out the practical steps that you can take to contribute to that big ambition around decarbonisation in the UK. So we did a survey as part of our partnership with O2 recently, and we saw that only 1 in 10 businesses of the 1,000 we surveyed are measuring their carbon footprint now. And the cost of adapting their business was perceived to be the biggest challenge to stopping businesses from taking action in this space. And we also found that funding for adaptations and change is also a big barrier. 30% of firms telling us that finance was holding them back. We can see from our research that larger firms are more likely to have the resource than smaller firms to take steps towards the transition, but that all firms are going to need to get on board and make a change if we're to meet our net zero targets. We're working with government to advocate for a longer term plan around the transition to net zero, including better communication with businesses, helping businesses to adapt, providing incentives within the tax system, for example, and supporting the low carbon sector to produce the technologies that we all need to adapt. And on top of that, investing in the skills that we need to move towards net zero as a UK economy. Now, I'm delighted to be joined today by 3 experts who've come here to share their wisdom and their experience around net zero. We've got Tracy Herald from Virgin Media O2, Ben Westerman, who's recently joined the BCC and is now our climate challenge expert, but has been working across this issue for a number of organisations, and Richard Hagan from Crystal Doors, who is a living example of what a business can do when they really embrace this agenda, and I'm told award-winning business as well. So looking forward to hearing about Richard's story. So over the next hour, we're going to be hearing from our guests and taking your questions on this important issue. We have a Q&A function. If you can look at the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's a Q&A function. If you pop your questions in there as we go, I will try and get through as many of those as we can in the course of the event. So use that rather than the chat function for your questions. And if there are any questions we don't get to or can't answer, then hopefully we can point you to some resources in the follow-up after today. So enough from me. Let's start hearing from our guests. And first we're going to hear from Tracy Herald from Virgin Media O2. Hi, Tracy.
Hi, Hannah. Thank you so much. And thank you for having me here today. So yeah, I'm Tracy Herald. I lead the sustainability team at Virgin Media O2. I'm responsible for the development and delivery of our net zero ambition and also our wider responsible business plan for people and planet. I'm really delighted to be here today to talk about net zero, to share a little bit about our experience, our insights to date. But I think, as Hannah has said, these conversations are always a great opportunity to learn, not just from others on the panel, but also to hear from our audience about your challenges and how we can work together on the journey to net zero. I think, for me, net zero is definitely a team sport. So it's great to have the chance to discuss how we can support each other, share strategies, ideas and solutions that help all of us on this important journey to a lower carbon future. For context, Virgin Media O2 brings together two of the UK's biggest brands, combining more than 46 million broadband, mobile and home subscribers and over 18,000 employees. With our combined mobile and broadband network, our focus is on supercharging the digital economy, so connecting customers, communities and businesses across the UK. I think as a connectivity champion, net zero feels like a really business critical issue for Virgin Media O2, and we have a responsibility, I think, to prioritise climate action if we're to help the UK to reach its net zero goal. And that's by both managing our own impact, but also helping our customers to decarbonise too. So we've committed to be net zero in our own operations by 2025. And really for us, that's based on a commitment to go further, faster to reduce our own impacts. We're really confident that we can hit the short-term targets, but of course we're a newly merged business standing up on the 1st of June this year. So our footprint has changed and we're now reassessing and realigning our plans against the new net zero standard to develop a full scope net zero goal. So we're in the fortunate position, I think, prior to our merger, that both Virgin Media and O2 had a really strong heritage in reducing environmental impact. Over the last decade, we've continued to place focus on areas where we can make the biggest difference. So that's included procuring renewable electricity. So we buy 100% renewable electricity wherever we directly control the bill. We've been managing energy demand across our network and estate. So we've installed automated solutions like our smart turn-off function that powers down our network when demand is low. We've been driving greener practices as well across our supply chain, so encouraging our suppliers to set carbon reduction plans and using eco-efficient products. And together, those have helped us to reduce supply chain emissions by 35%. And of course, we're also helping our customers to make greener choices with initiatives like O2 Recycle, our device recycling scheme, but also Eco Rating, which is our phone labelling scheme that helps to rate the environmental credentials of handsets. And from a B2B perspective, we're rolling out digital workplace tools and also supporting flexible working. I think it's fair to say that starting and implementing a net zero journey isn't easy, isn't without its challenges. As we've progressed, we've learned a lot, about the importance, for example, of executive buy-in, focusing on those big quick wins, maintaining a long-term focus on our business priorities, even though they might change, and really actively engaging our employees to help us drive the agenda. It's true, we're still learning all the time, and we're really open to sharing that learning, actually sharing what we know, collaborating with others and finding ways to deliver solutions to our customers that help to reduce their costs, improve their productivity, and also help them to reduce their carbon. For us, it's definitely a team sport, as I said, and our partnership with the British Chambers to launch the Net Zero Hub is really just one example of how we're opening up and facilitating conversations to try and share that knowledge. I know, as you said, Hannah, that I'm in the really fortunate position to be supported by a specialist sustainability team. We've got energy, we've got procurement specialists, and I know that for many smaller businesses, there may just be one person who's responsible for leading this change. So the hub is really designed to help offer resources, advice, and discussions just like this one that will help to break down that journey into bite-sized chunks, making net zero feel much more achievable, I hope. So beyond our own net zero goal, the other thing we're really focusing on, of course, is the impact that we can have through connectivity. We're in the fortunate position that, of course, connectivity can drive really big innovations and help others to reduce their carbon. So we've actually seen the direct benefits that connectivity and digital tech can have on helping businesses to decarbonise. We've been rolling out digital workplace platforms that help companies work more flexibly. We've been offering cloud-based services and solutions. And actually, over the course of the last year, O2 business customers have saved, I think, 1.4 million tonnes of carbon. So it really shows that through application of our digital products and services, we can help others to drive down their carbon too. And of course, it's been a really challenging couple of years, but for us, I think we know there's a real opportunity and a real space for innovation here. And we know too that SMBs have a really strong track record in driving that innovation. I think if we just look at the agility and innovation that's been demonstrated during COVID, many small and medium businesses adjusting or changing their business models to respond to the pandemic. It's really my hope, I think, that the climate crisis can also drive fresh impetus to innovate and to help us think differently about how we all build our businesses to be more resilient and more future-proofed for the long term. Particularly excited, as you said, Hannah, to hear from Richard about the exciting ways that Panel FX have been leaning into the challenges and opportunities around our net zero future. So hopefully that provides a brief intro to our own net zero experience, the opportunities for tech to play a role, and also our focus on collaboration to tackle a defining issue of our time and to do it together. So Hannah, back to you.
Wonderful, thanks Tracy, and lots of little things there we can start to dig into when we get to the question. So thank you for that introduction. I'm going to go to Ben Westerman now. So Ben's from the British Chambers of Commerce, but has experience of working on this issue from a range of different perspectives. So over to you, Ben.
Thanks, Hannah. So yeah, as Hannah says, I've been working on this for some years now with companies and organisations in the UK and in Europe, from both a kind of business angle and from a political angle. And I was interested to hear just now the mention of the word collaboration, because I think collaboration is one of the keys to this. It's a huge challenge, and it's going to require sharing ideas, sharing knowledge across sectors, across businesses. It's one of the key challenges facing businesses in the next 10, 20 years. And it's only through kind of that knowledge sharing that I think it's going to happen. I think it's also very interesting to hear about other people's concerns, other people's opportunities, what other people are doing already. I'm very much looking forward to hearing from Richard to hear about the exciting things that he's been doing already. For the British Chamber of Commerce, our role, I think, is to face two ways. On the one hand, to face government and speak to government about what businesses need, what the concerns are, how we can work together, but then to face businesses and help our members and chambers around the UK to get there too, and to start implementing their own targets and plans. I think one of the key things is that small businesses, SMEs, are crucial to this. They make up a huge amount of UK businesses. They provide over 60% of private sector jobs. So quite frankly, the UK's very ambitious 2050 net zero target, which is legislated for, won't happen without the engagement and proactive action from the SME sector. And there are, as Tracy says, tons of opportunities. The world is changing significantly. It has in the last year. You think about how we were 18 months ago and how we are now, and how much more we rely on tech now, and the solutions that have popped up to help us to work in this hybrid way in the last year and a half. These opportunities are going to keep on coming as the economy starts to shift towards more green solutions, and as policies are put in place that encourage those things. And for us at BCC, part of our role is helping businesses access that, helping businesses take advantage of those opportunities, because in all of this, there are massive opportunities for business to innovate and to get ahead of the curve and to grow significantly in what is an exciting space. There are, of course, there are major economic opportunities in transition. Government is looking to encourage transition to green choices through investment, through job creation, through skills, and in those are, as I say, very exciting opportunities. Of course, the first section I kind of mentioned, us speaking to government, there are several things we want to see, and it's very important, in my view, that government takes action to create the conditions in which you, as business owners, can take advantage of these opportunities, but can also start to engage with it. It's a bit of a minefield, wading through a lot of technical jargon, wading through things which may not seem important right now, because you have the more pressing day-to-day task of running your business. And we're talking about things that are 10 years, 15 years, 20 years down the line. So we want to see, as Hannah said at the beginning, we want to see investment in things like skills, in science education, in R&D to allow the conditions for that innovation to happen. We want to see policy that incentivizes those things. We want to see subsidies towards green choices. We want to see incentivization in the markets away from, let's say, bad choices and towards green choices, to move markets in the right direction. we're already seeing procurement rules with government contracts changing significantly to encourage those who are undertaking government contracts, well, in fact, to mandate those who are undertaking government contracts to have green criteria as part of their core offering. I think the last thing really is for both us, for government, and for you, is articulating the benefits of this. I think it's very easy to worry about the negatives, and there are, of course, a lot of challenges that come up with climate challenge. But there are a number of benefits that I've already mentioned, particularly economic benefits, as well as environmental and ethical ones. And I think articulating those is very, very important. There's a lot of polling that generally agrees that somewhere around 4 in 5 British consumers say that they are fairly or very concerned about climate change. And so you can see that it's in the best interests of a company, commercial interests, to be mindful of your green credentials. So I think articulating that is very, very important. And people are increasingly interested in businesses which are taking those choices. So I'm looking forward to kind of hearing your questions today and talking a bit about what you can do to kind of get that journey going. So thank you.
Great, thanks Ben, thanks for that overview. And now to Richard. So we're true to form on a BCC event, we're all over the country. So we've had Tracy in Hampshire, Ben in London, I'm in West Sussex, and now we're going up to Rochdale to Richard to hear about what Crystal Doors have been up to.
Thank you very much for inviting me here, and thank you very much for everybody who's listening. It is true, only 1 in 10 businesses do know about carbon footprint reporting, have taken some serious action towards their strategy to net zero. What's exciting is this year is probably the first year that the cost of not doing anything towards net zero is actually greater than actually taking those first steps. Obviously, we've seen the energy prices rise. I was in a meeting yesterday. If someone wants to buy electricity today, it's 30 pence a kilowatt. I have solar panels on the roof. We produce 246 kilowatts peak, but it's 220,000 kilowatts a year. We send it back to the grid. So the starting point for Crystal Doors was 2015. I was an absolute beginner, exactly the same as anybody else, probably even worse than everybody else, because I had an S-Class Mercedes and it cost me £100 to drive down to London and back. Now I've got a Tesla, it's free there and free back with renewable energy. So things have changed, but I've done it from the financial point of view. And it's more about save money, save planet, and it starts simple. And the simple steps is to find the person who's passionate about sustainability first, who's then going to become that champion. And they'll be the Chief Sustainable Officer, which is an excellent position to be in. And it's for them to be exactly what Tracy said. It's a team sport. It really is. It's about what we can do together. And it's all those little steps. There's no single fix. What we've got is lots and lots of little steps. And this is where Crystal Doors has really sort of gone beyond. And one of the questions was about encouraging to use public transport and bikes for employees. Crystal Doors is a policy. We only want to employ people that live within 3 miles so they can walk, so they can come in by bicycle. And then exactly the same as what Tracy is doing with the digital technology and this hybrid working is we have a digital transformation manager who lives in Preston, but he's a remote worker. So once again, we're picking up the best of the adaptation. And I think that's where Ben's coming in from, that angle of sort of saying that, yes, we've got the policies by government to push us along, but today we have got the technology and we have got that ability. So obviously the simple wins are LED lights and even active LED lights. We've got parts of the factory for which aren't critical that if they go off and somebody's working on the night shift, but we've got certain passages, we've got all the officers, they're on activated when people are moving within them. Because of the amount of energy that we've used, we've got rid of all the star delta, which is big users of electricity, to everything's inverters. So what we've got is a dust extractor that I used to go back to lock up at night time, and 150 kilowatt dust extractor is still running because they forgot to turn it off. So when Tracy was talking about we've got automated, that's exactly where we are. And the new dust extractor, as soon as they turn the first machine on, it starts up, and as soon as they turn the last machine off, it then stops automatically. So it's these quantum changes almost in our reductions, but it's first by starting on what can we invest in now, and we're looking now for the value. We're looking for the length of time that you have that assets that you're purchasing, and how does it then fit into circular economy? How can you get a value out of it at the end? And this is where O2 are really, really pushing hard. And I really do champion the big companies. A small company such as myself, I can see something on the internet and take action, as you can do today by going to the Net Zero Hub or going to the Green Savings Calculator which gives you the understanding of hybrid workers. How much can a company save if somebody's working from home? The air conditioning, the number of times that people have sort of said, take the air conditioning out. I gave a presentation, it was on the hottest day, 37 degrees. We don't have air conditioning, we just open the windows and said that's what it is. We all want to go on holiday abroad to be too hot. So in this country, we've got rain, put an extra coat on. We need to adapt in a slightly different way. Instead of it sort of being this constant consumerism, that's the biggest saving I've made, is reduce the amount of spending on things that aren't necessary, and to be able to make sure that whatever I do spend the money on is for the long term. And this is the strategy for the small to medium-sized businesses, is unlike governments that have got a three-year or 1 year plan before they want to get elected again, is businesses, if we have a 5-year and a 10-year plan, and certainly Tracy is unbelievable for O2 to say 2025 they want to be net zero. Without going into the details, the scope 1 and scope 2, which is direct and indirect, which is your diesel and your electricity, those you can buy renewable. But then the scope 3, which is up and down your supply chain, that is very, very difficult. But Crystal Doors will be 1, 2, and 3, all the 15 sections of scope 3 carbon neutral. And it was only by starting and having a plan. And I think this is the main one, is to set that strategy with the Chief Sustainable Officer to find the baseline assessments. And with Crystal Doors, it was about a crisis in 2015, having no planning permission for biomass burner that I put in. It was end of my company. And the growth company did a 26-point action plan for energy efficiency resource. And I started going through those and saved money. And then with the money I'd saved, and then reinvested. And then the other one is I'm not bothered about the investments. It was just, it has to be cash flow neutral, because no cash, no business. And the solar panels, the dust extractor, everything that I've invested in has then been that long-term goal that might pay back within a year, 2 years, or even the solar panels now is less than 6 years. And these are the challenges that we've got, is we don't have to wait until government tells us or follow a standard or a framework. There's plenty out there on the internet. And that's where I started, is by doing that searching. And nowadays, there's so many businesses, it is about together. And it is about this team activity of engaging with everybody, engaging with your employees. We've changed our quality standard considerably. Instead of ISO 9001 and wanting to do all the different settings, once we've got all the employees on board, that we have a purpose of Crystal Doors to be that net zero, to be better for the environment, is the employees have got much more faith, vision, and understanding about the business, and therefore are thinking outside and sort of saying, what about, can we initiate doing this project and that project? But it meant that the quality has gone up because people actually are caring much more, because it really has become that team spirit.
Brilliant, thanks Richard. And just for context, Richard, could you just tell us the size of your business so that the guests get a sense of how big you are?
We've 31 employees at the moment and about 3 million turnover.
Excellent, thank you. So thanks all for those introductions. There's some really lots to dig into there. Both you, Richard, and Tracy mentioned employee engagement, and I just wonder if you could maybe both share some bit more detail about how you went about in a large business and a small one, engaging your employees in that process and getting that buy-in that you talked about across all levels of the organisation. Tracy, would you like to go first?
Yes, of course. I think it's a really interesting and important dimension of how you build a really successful net zero strategy, actually. And Richard has made the point about, starting with a plan and really getting your business behind that plan. So I think for us, what's been really important is ensuring that we've had really strong executive sponsorship. So the leadership team in our business really understands the plan that we've made and is really ready to back that plan. We've gone one step further, actually, particularly in terms of our carbon performance, in that we've linked our carbon performance to remuneration for our executive committee. So 5% of their overall remuneration target is linked to our carbon performance as a business. And I think we all know, don't we, that what gets measured gets managed. So really for us, the focus here has been making sure that we're not only driving a sense of leadership for our carbon reduction targets, but also accountability. That's been really important. So that's at the kind of executive level. If we look at our population, one of the things that we've introduced is a sustainability objective for our entire workforce. So everybody across our business is invited to commit to a sustainability objective as part of their performance activity at the start of the year. And of course, that in practice, that sustainability objective will take many different shapes depending on which part of the business you're in and what you're working on. So if you're part of our brand team, it might be about how you engage with our agencies to reduce our carbon footprint there. If you're part of our networks team, you'll be directly involved in our network transition. If you're part of our procurement team, that will be about the role that you play in working with our suppliers to drive down emissions. But the intention really is to try and send a signal to our whole business that everybody has a key role to play here and everybody is responsible together for driving our success around the net zero goal. And then one of the things that we've done more recently, and this has certainly been driven, I think, in part by the pandemic and the move to remote working, is we've used Workplace as a kind of digital tool to try and encourage and support innovation in our business around environment. Really, that's been about bringing together, exactly as Richard says, the most passionate environmentalists in our business, right? The folks who care about this and are actually pushing us to do more, to go further, faster. And what's been fantastic about that is we've created a community of around 1,000 employees who are ready not only to kind of challenge and take responsibility for making changes in their own day-to-day work, but we're also starting to see a really lovely interplay in terms of the influence they're having on the behaviour and choices that our employees make, both inside but also outside the business. So we've had conversations on everything from diet to transport to volunteering in communities, so protecting and enhancing nature. We've also been talking about investment, so people's pension choices and how that impacts on the overall investment that we're making in the transition to a greener economy. So I think for us, it's absolutely about trying to create a top to bottom sense of commitment for net zero, helping everybody to understand that they can play a role in helping us on that journey. It's not the kind of specific role of a specialist sustainability team. We're all in to achieve net zero together. And as I say, using the energy of our people to really kind of lean in around the issues and help drive innovation in their day jobs, but also inspire us as a company to be greener every day has been certainly part of a success for us.
Excellent, thank you. And inevitably probably having an impact on what people do outside of work as much as they do for the business. Richard, you mentioned you found a sustainability champion. Is that a core role, or is that something someone does on top of their day job? And also you mentioned how you've got this policy of employing local or having a remote worker. How's that gone down with the workforce when you made that transition?
The first one is the Chief Sustainable Officer is an existing person in an existing job. I work with universities and there's very few environmentalists that are going to go. It's very, very large companies such as O2, but even within O2, you've got a wonderful person, Tracy, who obviously is a champion. But for the majority of companies, even large companies, it's the health and safety, it's the operations director, it's the quality, because they understand frameworks, they understand standards, and therefore they have a proper strategy of how to then implement it. Regarding the employee engagement, for Crystal Doors in 2015 to probably 2018, everyone saw Richard's just trying to save money, he's spending this is the investment. They understood that side until Richard came out of his fancy car and came up with a Nissan Leaf 2. And they were like, what's going on? And that's what you need, is that tipping point, something to sort of jerk people to say, why are you on this journey? What's it about? And then people want to understand your belief, your faith, your understanding, your vision. And that's when they started to join in and sort of say, oh, Richard, this is what I've done. And it's about a celebration. It really has been a continuous epic journey of celebrating all these little wins. And it's great to see that such a large company can also be on that same epic journey of saying, this is what we're doing. And there are drivers. We've got a wellbeing fund where every year, £200, whatever's going to make you happy at home. They've bought PlayStations, they've bought Xboxes, they've bought bicycles. Some people have done the garden up. That's all we wanted. Now we're wanting to offset everybody's personal carbon footprint because we've got all the employees engaged to find out, because there's so many websites to find your personal carbon footprint. And once again, I'll offset it. And if it costs me all my money to offset it, those that have got a lower carbon footprint, I'll have the cash difference. So therefore, there's a slight incentive. So I'm probably about, like you say, the tiny amount, probably less than 1%. But it's all about how do we champion our steps going forwards. It is a crisis in one sense, but to me, it's such a positive and exciting ability to be able to change Instead of focusing on quality, oh, you've done this wrong, or focusing on the problems and challenges which we all have as businesses, it's now a case of how do we keep on coming out with all these positives to celebrate? And that's where the journey then becomes something that everybody becomes focused on. And that is exactly what good leadership is about, is to be the leader to set an example, but for other people then to want to follow you and be able to also champion all the great positive actions that we can take to make this a better world.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Richard. And just before we started, the four of us had a brief chat about hybrid working. We had BCC held an event yesterday on hybrid working, and there's some advantages to sort of the new ways of working in terms of maybe people driving their cars a bit less. But then at the same time, I was having that internal battle with myself about whether or not to put the heating on this morning. Decided not to. But, you know, there is that case of we're heating, you know, 30 homes instead of one office. Ben, what do you think is the sort of the pros and cons of the sort of changes, the way that some people are working, and what do you think the sort of best approach would be to doing it in a green and friendly way?
It's a good question, and it's difficult to balance the two, as you say. I think that's the key thing, is that net zero is all about balance. Net zero doesn't mean getting rid of everything; it means balancing your emissions by taking some emissions out of the atmosphere. I think that staying at home clearly has benefits, because it drives down office emissions, it drives down the traveling emissions. There's all sorts of obvious benefits. I think that what will happen going forward, and this is a bit of a guess, of course, but what will happen going forward is that will become easier to do in a green way, because we're going to see cities and towns change and offices change in the coming years, and homes change, and homes are going to become greener. I think that's something we've been talking about, is people taking individual action. People can start to take individual choices at home, but their homes are going to become greener either way, because we're going to see things like heat pumps come in. We're going to see more and more people switching to clean power, and by taking those small actions, you're reducing your own carbon footprint. So kind of tie that in then to the work thing. You're kind of making a contribution, because by staying at home, you're not traveling, you're not polluting by using a car or by using the bus or the train or whatever. You're not encouraging offices to stay on for 14 hours a day or whatever and have the lights on, have the computers running. So I think it in some ways has been very, very positive. And you look at the stats for the last 18 months, and the global climate kind of footprint for the last 18 months has reduced drastically, as we've seen less air travel, less train travel, less cars. So there are a lot of positives from that.
Thank you. And I just I'm going to come to questions from our audience very shortly, but I just want to touch on cost. I think Richard's made a really good case for where actually there's a good return on investment. There are measures you can take which actually pay off in the sort of short to medium term. But there are real cost barriers, or perceived cost barriers. Certainly that came through in our survey for business. Tracy, I wonder what approach you've taken at O2 to cost, and how businesses might address that challenge, but particularly any kind of funding or new technology that's available that can help with on the cost front.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good point, and I think it would be disingenuous to say that net zero is a kind of cost neutral endeavour. It definitely involves some investment. And I think the interesting thing for us was that when we looked at some of those investment scenarios for our own business, if you assess them in the kind of classic 3-year business cycle, actually some of those investments looked like they were really quite expensive comparative to the level of change we were driving in our kind of carbon performance. But if you assess that investment over a longer term span, so up to a decade later, what you'd start to see is that actually the business is reducing its costs, exactly as Richard says. It's actually becoming way more efficient. And also, I think one of the things that's coming for us and that we're really conscious of is the introduction of carbon pricing. So thinking about in the longer term, whether in fact there will be taxation linked to your carbon emissions performance. And so sometimes actually what you're doing is you're making an investment in the short term that will create savings for you in the longer term. I think that's been a really important driver for us in starting to move the business from more of a kind of short-term focus towards that kind of longer-term sustainable future-proofing of our business. I think, in the context of the work that we do currently to support businesses, there's all kinds of ways in which we've been using technology to help businesses. And Richard's absolutely right. You know, what's been true for us is that, of course, there is a carbon benefit here, but there's also cost benefits and productivity benefits that we're really keen to drive. So, you know, we talked a little bit already about digital workplace solutions, so helping a workforce to work from anywhere. And for us, that's absolutely about improving efficiency, improving work-life balance, improving productivity, but also saving cost and carbon too. Richard's already mentioned the green savings calculator. I think for us, we know that there are so many businesses that are now reconsidering their flexible working settlement in light of the pandemic. So the calculator really helps you to work out the carbon cost and time savings of working in a different way moving forward, so that businesses can plan for the future. We've looked at initiatives like reducing energy consumption through smart metering. So, you know, smart meters give you the benefit of real-time information that helps you understand energy use in offices or in manufacturing sites or in warehouses. It keeps product at optimal temperatures. And again, that's about reducing costs. It's not about having, you know, offices running energy or burning energy, as Richard says, overnight or for long periods of time when it's simply not needed. So it's about the real-time data that helps you learn a bit more about how your business is operating and where you can drive down cost. From a fleet perspective, of course, we've been thinking about how we use you know, fleet telematics to learn more about route planning, driver behavior, fleet maintenance, and also the potential for a business to transition to electric vehicles. So that's, again, for us about delivering efficiency, but also carbon reduction. So I think the intention always is to try and use our technology in a really smart way that's thinking through not only how do we cut the carbon, but actually how can we make this business more efficient and use its resources more efficiently moving forward.
Thank you. And Ben, on the cost, there's a question from Loretta around funding. So we've talked about some sticks that the government's introducing. So the procurement rules, for example, making sure you have green credentials if you want to be part of the government procurement process. But are there any carrots there coming through that you can see coming through, particularly as the European Regional Development Funds dry up? That's going to be replaced with UK SPF, but we don't have the details around that yet. Do you see there being some carrots in there for smaller businesses to help with this transition?
Yes, absolutely. You're right, there's an awful lot of stick at the moment. Of course, the big stick being 2050 is the legal deadline for us to hit net zero. But government's aware there has to be some carrot. So you mentioned ERDF, that's a very good example. And for those of you who kind of don't know, it was a European Union funding program that developed particularly programs that had green credentials in the UK. Lots of funding, for instance, went into the Southwest, where there's lots of agricultural programs. So the answer is yes, government's very, very aware that big businesses, for instance, need their value tail, let's call it their value tail, so the SME end of their value tail to respond to the agenda, otherwise this isn't going to work. And SMEs is a very good way of categorizing businesses by size, but of course it's not a good way of describing different kinds of businesses. You know, a restaurant isn't the same as a PR agency, and is going to have different challenges when it comes to cutting its emissions. So government has started some coalitions. There's a Race to Zero coalition, there's a We Mean Business coalition, which are grouping businesses together to talk about this, both big and small, and to talk about how investment can move around. But through the Shared Prosperity Fund, which was supposed to happen about 2 years ago, but then, of course, the pandemic came along and public finances changed, there will be funding for SMEs to undertake this work, because government knows that it can't just kind of tell people to do this. It can't just create coalitions. It has to kind of put some impetus into the market, essentially, to incentivize this for small businesses. So I expect that now we are through the, let's hope, the worst of the pandemic, and the government can kind of get on with the agenda that it planned when it was elected in 2019, that a big part of that will be the Shared Prosperity Fund, which will cover both investment in this kind of activity and the skills required to get there.
Thanks, Ben. And one of the things that BCC has been saying for a long time to government is when you look at something like business rates, a business investing in solar panels, for example, that impacts on their rateable value and can drive business cost up. And we've been saying for a long time, and it's going back to Treasury again ahead of the next budget, that actually things like that are disincentivizing businesses from taking steps towards net zero. So hopefully over time, and with strong voices from chambers and others talking to government about this, we can start to see some change in the system that not just makes it financially make sense just in terms of internally within your business, but in terms of the tax system and other things around the business environment. We've got a question around transport. We've sort of touched on this a little bit already, but Mark Christie's asking, do we see encouraging staff to use public transport and bikes and walking to work as part of walking towards a net zero target? Richard, you said you've been encouraging staff to do this. Where was that on your kind of list of priorities when it came to move towards net zero?
The main priority was about saving money. And like I said, this year is the year that you can actually save more money. And as Ben says, there's a lot more sticks. We found out last year that the pension companies lost 123 billion by having shares in fossil fuels. It's the pension companies that are now driving Tracy and O2 to have to do a lot. Otherwise, they'll pull out their share investments. That's then trickling down in what's called Scope 3, which means all the people that they're buying from now need to prove their credentials to how green that they are. And therefore, we're now getting this knock-on effect that the big companies are starting to go down to the SMEs and say, unless you've got a strategy and you've pledged to net zero and when you've seen some actions, we won't be able to buy from you anymore. An example is obviously Apple just threatened everybody and said you've got to buy renewable energy because they get a quick win straight away. But we've got government now saying, and somebody sort of said, it came out of B's that we were looked after, now we're with the Treasurer. It's going to be a struggle where funding is going to be. The government's now saying come next March, any contracts over 5 million, that company has to prove its credentials to do with green. So for Crystal Doors, we were very, very dramatic, and this is one of the reasons why we won the awards. February, we told all our suppliers, all the new ones, if you're not net zero and you've got your plan, we can't deal with you. Surprisingly, no suppliers came through that are new. With our existing suppliers, we've looked after them and we've tried to educate them. By this Christmas, we're doing it with our customers. You can't buy from Crystal Doors unless you've pledged to net zero. It's the turning point, is the quick wins are out there. People have got enough information. The government knows it. When I was speaking to Martin Baxter, who's the Chief Policy Director of IEMA, the technology is here today with Tracy, with O2, with what we've got out there. It's for us to make those savings ourselves. It's not waiting for government to say, can we hand some more money out, which is obviously what councils like to do. And businesses would like to have those benefits, but unfortunately, it's us to have to think outside the box. And that's the reason why we've got to do it together and do it as a team spirit of something positive.
Thanks, Richard. Tracy, how much, you talked about your sort of fleet of vehicles, but in terms of sort of your employees getting to and from work, how much of the conversation have you had with them around the transport that they choose?
Yeah, I mean, I think, net zero is definitely about everybody taking action to do their bit. I think, that includes the way that we work, travel, play, really. So sustainability and sustainable travel has definitely been very much part of our plan. We know that the transport sector is obviously a really high emitter in relation to carbon emissions. So focusing on how our people travel has been key. And I think, it's important to say that it also offers other benefits. So, reducing air pollution and improving health benefits by encouraging our people to travel in different ways. So definitely a win-win there. And from an O2 perspective, we've been encouraging sustainable travel for a while, of course, linked to flexible working. So traveling only when you need to. But we've also introduced initiatives like car sharing, EV points in our car park, and then obviously subsidies for bikes and other things. So for us, it's been about thinking about the entirety of our business, but it comes right back down to the role that our employees can play every day in helping us towards that greener future.
Thank you. So in terms of getting started, so people who are kind of earlier on in the journey, we know that there are tools there which you can use to sort of start your assessment. You can look at what is your carbon footprint, what are the things that are contributing to that, and you can get kind of your base starting point. But what would be where would you start? I mean, what's the first step you might take on that journey from we're going to do something to we've started acting? Tracy, I mean, you've been doing this for a long time, so I don't know if you can cast your mind back that far, or even if you were working there at the time, but where do you start with something like this?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think I've reflected on this a little bit already. You know, as Ben has said, no one business is the same. You know, everyone's got kind of different business operations cultures and business models, and that often means that measuring and tackling carbon emissions varies wildly from one business to another. But I think the important thing to say is, you know, absolutely start by starting. You know, climate change and getting to net zero can feel a bit overwhelming, but no one is expecting you to solve it on your own, that's for sure. And I think awareness and a desire to do something is absolutely the best, you know, the best possible place to start. I've talked about starting at the top just because I think that kind of executive leadership and involvement for you know, net zero as part of your business strategy feels really key to actually making sure that you're properly embedding it as a goal and not keeping it as a side project. Mainstreaming net zero feels really important. So getting, you know, senior level buy-in to make sure that you're driving the agenda feels really important. Hannah, you've talked about, you know, measuring your current emissions. I think that's really helpful because it not only helps you work out what's directly within your control, so what you can start to take action on and address today, but it also helps you work out where you need to leverage your relationships and your influence, for example, in your supply chain. I think, you know, Richard's example is a really fantastic example, isn't it, of pure disruption. So not only thinking about how you drive your suppliers to perform better, but actually starting to push back on your customers if they're not interested in working in a low carbon or net zero way. I think that's a true innovation, and it's a really brave business model that I think we could all learn something from. I've talked about target setting. Again, you know, focusing on the areas where you can make the biggest difference, whether that's switching to renewable electricity, electrifying your fleet, working remotely, or indeed switching to eco-friendly products and services that help to eliminate or reduce waste. I think we talked again about involving staff. That's really important. I think, you know, often your people can be some of the most passionate about environment and climate change, and I think harnessing their energy and enthusiasm can really help to drive fresh ideas and innovation, and again makes it feel like it's not a kind of lonely job to do, but something that more of you are getting involved in and taking part in. And I suppose I'd also say it won't be surprising in the context of this webinar that it's absolutely key to, you know, ask for help and to steal with pride. The Net Zero Hub that we've created is, you know, aimed at providing all kinds of tools and information to really help businesses get started. We've uploaded our own report, which outlines our own journey to net zero, and that provides information on the approach that we've taken, our learnings, our advice to others. We're also working, of course, really closely with the Carbon Trust and with Good Business, and we're drawing, I think, a lot on their expertise as a critical friend to help us with our strategy and to kind of continue to push us to evolve. So I think there's a number of different ways to go at net zero, but I think, yeah, starting with executive level sponsorship and commitment, and then really starting to work out where you can create the biggest and quickest wins feels like a really nice place to start.
Thanks, Tracy. We've got about 10 minutes left, so keep the questions coming if you've got any quick ones you want to get in before the end. I'm going to come back to Martha's question towards the end. So just, Richard, you mentioned circular economy, and this is something that the Glasgow Chamber of Commerce have done loads of really great work on, and various other chambers around the country are also getting involved in that. Could you just tell us a little bit about circular economy and what the benefits are to you as a business?
Yeah, so circular economy is about not just taking the resources out of the planet, it's about trying to keep the resources and be able to then reuse them over and over again. So Crystal Doors manufactures vinyl wrap doors, which is a plastic coating. So when I spoke to a master's student, straight away they said that's not environmentally friendly whatsoever. And we are now researching to try and do a kitchen for life where it's made out of Lego blocks and you're reusing it. So it's what's called cradle to cradle, which is what is the carbon or environmental impact from when you're extracting the raw materials out of the planet, and then how do you then process it? But at the end of its life, how does it then get reprocessed back into the system? So obviously in the fashion industry, we're now seeing clothes being pulled apart and then use that as the fabric to go back into it. We see that O2 have their circular economy in the sense that they're then passing them on. So it's how do we extend the life of a product? So it's no longer consume, throw away, consume again. So you've got countries like Norway and Scandinavia, because they are rich, they just want a new product every single year. So they might have the best and the highest grade, but because they buy new every single year, that is not circular economy. We've got to slow down the speed of consumption. And that's why there's a huge amount of savings to be made by businesses to think more clever of how do you keep something for 10 years and not say, oh, we'll get the new one next year.
Thanks, Richard. That's really helpful. And there's some great examples I heard from a team in Glasgow. So the coffee shops in the shopping centre who were using the leftover ground beans that they had from making coffee was the fertiliser that was being used to keep the plants alive in the shopping centre. And then there's a company out in, I think it's in the Netherlands, where you essentially rent clothes. So rather than buying clothes all the time, and I'm sure that's happening elsewhere in the UK, but the idea that it's, if you want something for a short time, you borrow it rather than you actually buy it and then discard it. So there's some interesting innovations happening there. The question from Sarah Chapman about information. So the British Chamber of Commerce website, there is a net zero hub, which we've worked with our partners at O2. There's lots of information on there, and that also links out to government resources and government guidance on all of this as well. So do take a look at that, and we'll send links out after this event as well. And Charles's question there in terms of funding, I think that was in relation to the conversation we were having about the Shared Prosperity Fund. And Ben, as far as I'm aware, we don't have a set date on that yet. Is that right?
We do not, I'm afraid.
But we keep pushing. It's something that we continuously talk to government about, and as soon as we know anything, we will share it, and we'll share it via our websites. There's a question here about technology. So the more we use technology, so the more our entertainment and our work is harnessing using technology, the more we Zoom one another and so on, that all has an impact on power. So we might be traveling less, but we're consuming more energy socially as well as in work terms. Tracy, what can be done is that having an impact on carbon footprints? Is that pushing it up, and is there anything we can do to offset that? That's a question from Paolo.
Yeah, it's definitely a key challenge for us, and I think we're absolutely seeing demand for connectivity increasing. So that in turn is having an impact on our footprint, and it's something that we're really alive to. And I think what's been really important for us, of course, is focusing on renewable electricity as the way that we power and run our data centres. But beyond that, we're also looking at how we drive energy efficiency too. So we've recently had a complete overhaul of our data centres and our core network sites to introduce brand new energy efficient cooling equipment to regulate temperatures across the sites that keep our mobile network running. So the equipment itself actually uses natural cold air from the outside to help cool our data equipment when it needs it most. So that's really, rather than relying on traditional electric powered air conditioning, we're trying to use free air cooling to bring down the demand, I guess, that's rolling through those data centres now, and also reducing reliance on polluting refrigerant gases. I think the total kind of renovation will save us 1 million kilograms of CO2 every year. So it's a really significant change that we're making to how our data centres run, accepting that demand is increasing all the time. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think in my opening remarks, one of the things that we're always focused on, in fact, is the enabling role of our technology. So we know that, the application of digital products and services can, in turn, help our customers to reduce their carbon impacts. So for us, this is a real balance, I think, between making sure that we're being very responsible about the core impacts of our own business, and we're being as intelligent and efficient about energy management and energy use in that context. But then we're also trying to think in new and imaginative ways about helping our customers to unlock the role that technology can play in helping them to save carbon too.
Brilliant, thank you. So we're coming up to the end of our time. So I'm just going to come to each of you in turn and just ask you, so Martha Davis asked a question about the most important change they made. So if you could each think about, if there's one takeaway you want everyone to have from today, the one thing that you think sort of can really make a difference, what do you think that could be? And I'm going to put Ben on the spot and ask him first. And any kind of final thoughts you want to leave our guests with today, Ben?
Absolutely, and thank you for picking on me first. Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me, in very practical terms, is you've heard Richard talking about scope 3. I think the biggest thing is scope 1 and 2. So they are emissions that you're directly responsible for. And I think having that on the agenda at board meetings regularly from now is the most important thing. So you can start thinking about things that we've heard about today, thinking about energy efficiency, the building that you're in. If you use rented premises, does it meet the government's minimum energy efficiency standard? Is your fleet, are you going to have redundant assets in your fleet if you use diesel engines, which won't be useful in about 5 years' time? Thinking about those kind of easy wins that we've written about on our blog and the Net Zero Hub and that kind of thing now, because there may be a small upfront cost now, but it'll cost a heck of a lot more if you don't come to this until kind of 8 years' time. So I think my big takeaway really would be mindfulness and being aware that although it's a bit daunting both financially and in terms of the logistics of it, that acting now really is in your interest as a business.
Thanks, Ben. Tracy.
Thank you, Hannah. I think, for me, and I think Martha alludes to this actually too, with COP26 on the horizon and really a growing focus on environmental performance from our employees, from consumers, from business and public sector customers, from government and indeed increasingly, of course, from investors. I think all of those forces are really, galvanizing business to be more ambitious, but also I think to spot opportunities to compete more effectively for contracts and to secure investment too. So I think it's really important not to underestimate the external forces that are acting as fair winds now to help us drive change and create a more sustainable future for our businesses. But I think one of the things that Richard has really kind of brought to the table today, which I think is really worth underlining, is that this isn't just about the cost. And yes, Ben has said, net zero can feel very daunting. I absolutely accept that. But I think it is also a real opportunity to innovate. It's an opportunity to think differently. It's an opportunity to rethink how you'll run your business in the future. And I think there's something really exciting in that. This is not just about the kind of cost of net zero, but it's also the opportunities for innovation that it opens up. So my suggestion, I think, to everyone that's joined us today is to absolutely, be part of these conversations moving forward. Continue to collaborate, to ask questions, to ask for help and support, to share your knowledge too, and actually what's working for you. Because I think, as I said before, this is absolutely a team sport. I don't think any one of us individually has the answer to successfully achieving net zero. I think it's about all of us using all of the levers that we have available to us in our respective industries and sectors to think through how we can make the difference and how we can all get on this journey together.
Brilliant. And final quick thoughts from you, Richard, to leave us with today.
Is every communication, just what Tracy said, it's about that network. I'm surprised every single day of the champions that are out there, of what they're doing. And it's as soon as you start talking about climate change in a positive way, of what are you doing, where are you up to on your journey, and it's us doing it all together, that's going to make that massive change. And obviously, O2, fantastic partners.
Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for joining us here today. I hope you've had some really practical takeaways. I think key things coming through are get your buy-in from your team, have a plan, do your quick wins, and then look at your long-term investment and look at the return you get in terms of employee engagement, customer feedback, and financially those investments paying off, as Richard has really clearly shown us through his example, and Tracy through that kind of large and small business perspective from both of you. So thank you, Richard, Tracy and Ben, for your input. For everybody who's been tuned in today, we have the BCC O2 Net Zero Hub is there. There's lots of really great examples of businesses like Richard's that have been doing great things for you to have a look at. We are going to be up at COP26 in Glasgow in November, and we have a whole host of events going on there, so many of which you can learn about on our website, so go and have a look at that. And we look forward to carrying on supporting you and hearing and having this conversation on the road to net zero now and in the future. Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Thank you.